Welcome to PSYWAR Profiles, where we take an in-depth look at interesting individuals or groups that make up the Psyop regiment. Welcome back to PSYWAR Profiles. Today we're taking a look at the diversity of the Psychological Operations Regiment. With me today I have two currently serving Psychological Operations NCOs. YJ, Blanca, welcome. Thank you for coming out and talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Definitely interested in hearing both of your stories and how you got here. I think there's probably a lot of people out there that were in your shoes, or are in your shoes now where you were a few years ago, and so it'd be good for them to see, how you got here and the kinds of impacts that you're prepared to make within the military and so the globe. So if you don't mind, we'll start over here. Just kind of give us your background, how you came into the Army, or really before the Army, like where you were at, and then into the Army, and then how you got to Psyop, and then we'll bounce over to you, Blanca, after.
Okay. I was born and raised in Korea, and I came to U.S. when I was 22 years old. So how I am interested in the United States is by the media. So when I go to school, when I was in elementary school, I always watched a TV show which broadcasted by JFKN. That's an American military TV channel. So the reason why I watched that TV show was in the time other channels didn't broadcast the animation, but only JFK in that time frame, they broadcasted the animation such as Transformer. Now I know that, but I didn't know what they say and who was bad guy, who was good guy. But I think since then I was, having an interest in the United States. So after I finished my Korean Army time in 2009, I continued my university, and they offered me to go to do some internship program in United States. So I took a chance. I came here and worked and eventually met my wife and got married. So obtained the green card and then joined the United States Army. So that's my story. So
you were a soldier before.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, South Korea, right?
Yes, South Korea.
They have a conscription service?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And so you did your mandatory service, got out, went to school.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you, or what attracted the Army to you?
So in 2011, almost right after I came to the United States, I was watching news. At the time, the border issue between U.S. and Mexico was getting serious. So one of the news episodes was about the National Guard deploying and protecting the border. So I thought that's pretty cool. And once I obtained the green card, I decided to do what I wanted to do. And when I went to the interview with immigration officer, I told her that, she asked me, what is your plan after you get the green card? I told her, hey, I will serve the country. And she stamped the paper at the scene. So day after I got the green card, I went to recruiter. So I started my Army career from the National Guard.
Okay.
Yes.
So what did you do in the Guard? In
the Guard, I was 11 Bravo, the infantryman. Reason being is, there are two reasons. First one is, as a foreigner, still I was a green card holder.
Right.
So I didn't have much options because I couldn't obtain secret clearance as a foreigner. Another reason is the infantryman was shortest training, having a shortest training time. So that way I can start my career early as possible. So I chose the infantryman.
Okay, so you're in the Guard. Where were you living at the time?
At the time, I was in Arizona.
Okay,
Yes.
so you're in the Guard. Somehow, some way, you hear about Psyop. How did
No,
how,
that's not how it happened.
how did so you're an infantryman in the Guard. How did
Yes.
you end up in the Psyop regiment?
So you might remember that I mentioned about the news,
Mhm.
the border issues. And after I enlisted in the National Guard, the mission was still ongoing. So I chose to try the mission, and I got picked. I was doing about 4 or 5 months, and I felt like army is for me. So I decided to switch to the active duty.
Okay,
And then I went to the Fort Drum, New York. So
that's
the-
kept secret in the Army, right?
Yeah, I guess. So for the Psyop, I mean, 2017, I watched a documentary called "The Ghost Army."
Okay,
If you guys haven't watched it,
it's a good one.
go check that out.
It's very good.
Yes, this is about the special unit who used the psychological operation and military deception during the World War II, and they successfully deceived the German armed force. And I was fascinated. I was fascinated, so I Googled it. What is a psychological operation? And if you Google it, you will find the first article about psychological operation on Wikipedia. So I clicked it, and there were pictures about Psyop operation. One is leaflet drop. Two, loudspeaker. And at the moment, I realized what it is, and I wanted to do that
Cool.
because people laugh at it sometimes, right?
Right.
Sometimes people laugh at leaflet mission and loudspeaker, but I knew those works from my experience.
Okay,
So when I grew up in South Korea, I went to a specialty school. What I mean by specialty is that school is somewhat funded by Ministry of Reunification. The North Korean defectors, age of teenager or early 20s, they went to my high school. So I already had an interaction.
okay,
Also in South Korean Army, we had once or twice a month, there was a defector interview sessions. So I knew why they came to South Korea or China or defect to any other country. It is because those psychological operation. And I witnessed that when I was in Korean Army and living in South Korea. So that's why I wanted to do it.
awesome. No, that's a really cool story. So now you're here. Awesome. That's a really good experience. So definitely welcome here. Welcome to the regiment. So we're gonna move over to Blanca. Same question. Like, where's your background? Where did life begin for you? And then how did you find your way to the U.S. and into the Army?
So yes, hi. Thank you for having me, first of all. And second, me falling in love with the United States started early on. When we were kids, my siblings and I, I'm from Kosovo originally.
Okay.
Therefore, we grew up very poor. We didn't have food on the table, so our father decided that right before the war began, it's 1990, he decided that we're going to leave the country. We left because the war was starting, and we went to Germany. We immigrated to Germany. We went there as refugees. Life was really difficult. So, especially as refugees, but life in general was really, really difficult. The only escape that we ever had was television, right? Full House was one of those shows that we would watch constantly.
Full House.
I know, right?
Who's your favorite character?
We always called him Elvis Presley because he
Uncle
looked
Joey?
like Elvis. Yeah,
Uncle Joey.
Yeah,
Yep.
we absolutely fell in love with the American ways, right? We fell in love with American lifestyle. We fell in love with the opportunities that America was providing to their people, and the opportunities and freedoms, and we the only way we knew that was through television, right? So we had the same experience in that regard. Television is definitely the way to go if you're trying to learn a new culture, if you're trying to learn a new language, if you're trying to learn anything. But for us, it was literally an escape from reality. When we got to Germany, obviously life was not easy, and the only escape was school. My parents were not allowed to go to school when they were young, therefore they knew education was very important if you wanted to get anywhere in life. They always instilled education in us. So for them, waking us up early in the morning, making us do homework, they would walk us to school miles and miles, make sure that we go to the right schools, that we don't go to schools where there's a lot of problem children, children that are going to take us into wrong directions, because they knew that it was very, very important for us to get education in order to escape this life, that particular life that we had at the moment. And that's why education for me and my siblings is seriously important. So we chased education. And education literally got us to where we are now, and where I am now. Fast forward from Germany, right after the war in Kosovo stopped and the NATO-led mission with the United States in 2000. After the bombings, we went back because we wanted to make a difference. And we were still in refugee status in Germany. Literally, it was a status where you didn't know how much longer you were allowed to stay in the country. You were temporarily a resident in the country until the war in Kosovo was going to end. So when the time came in 99, 2000, we volunteered to return. We said we want to go back. It is a post-war country, but we want to go back so that we can make a difference in that country, and we can finally belong to a society, because obviously we never belonged in Germany since we were always just temporary residents. Right. Even though we completely, fully integrated into the culture, the westernized way that we had was all from Germany, because we went to the schools with German kids. All my friends were German. We spoke only German at home, so it wasn't like, oh, we'd go back and we'd go right back to the Albanian culture. We were completely Germanized. Yeah. So when we went to Kosovo, we had a really hard time going.
So it's almost like another culture shock.
It was absolutely a culture shock. I mean, we at home, of course, with the parents, we'd speak Albanian. So Kosovars in general, the majority is Muslim. So we also grew up in a Muslim household, right? So we'd go back home with the parents. It was always the Albanian culture, the Kosovar culture. However, with each other, it was like we were living two different lives, because we had two different cultures in the same household, right? So when we returned to Kosovo in the year of 2000, right after the bombings, everything was destroyed. Our house was destroyed, which was a mud house anyway. Everything was completely destroyed. We stayed with the uncles for a few months, started rebuilding the home, but we stayed then in a mud house for a few years until I finished high school. My sisters started working for USAID, United Nations. My other sister worked for the Ministry of Finance. She started doing IT. Mary, my oldest sister, she was working for USAID, for UN, and that's how then we got to meet interagency employees that were sent to Kosovo to help rebuild the country. And so 9/11 happens, right? Everybody that was in Kosovo, many of the contractors were moving to Iraq, and that's how my sister gets invited to go to Iraq to work for companies like Dankor, Wins, KBR was there.
All the contractors.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my older sister gets invited. Both my sisters go. And then I follow right after I finish high school in 2005. I was 19 years old. I arrived in Baghdad International Airport in a completely wrong outfit. I'm wearing a suit, going to Baghdad International Airport. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was there, and I had signed that contract. And now I was an employee of Dankor International, going to Baghdad Hotel, and doing finance with them. And that's how my life started. My journey started of starting to save enough money so I can get education in America. All these years that I did contracting, I did that because I wanted to finally get education in America. Why it took so long, because in 2005 I went to Iraq, stayed there for 5 or 6 months, and then I got an opportunity in Jordan. I was in Jordan for a year as well with Dankor. We were training police officers there, and Iraqi police officers at the border with Jordan and Iraq. I was still in finance, I did payroll there. And then I did another 4 years in Afghanistan, contracting with KBR, AC First, AECOM, different companies. So I did a total of 5.5 years, 6 years in the Middle East, just constantly contracting. All my 20s were work. Like, I never had a day off where I'm like, okay, this is it, I'm done. You know, I can breathe. No, it was always toward that goal of finally making it to the States and getting my education.
And this is having never been to the U.S.
No.
Had you worked with any of the U.S. military in any of those places? Or?
Well, that's where I fell in love with the United States Army. Afghanistan, Kandahar, I'm looking around and I'm like, all these soldiers, they come, they go, you know. We were there almost permanently because we kept on re-signing the contract, right? We were there watching the soldiers come and go. Then I started volunteering at Role 3 as just a volunteer, just to help out in the hospital, because I was like, what is this life? I'm waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning, 12.5 hours into my shift, and then I go to bed at 7 o'clock and then just start over again. And you know, it's 7 days a week, 12-hour days. So every single day is the same thing. So I'm like, there has to be something more to this, you know? And I go to the hospital and I'm like, do you guys need any help? You know, I can do whatever. I'll help you, whatever. And they're like, yeah, sure, we need help. We've been needing help. And I didn't even have, here I am, a TCN, third country nationality, in the middle of Afghanistan, a contractor. We hardly had access to anything.
Right.
They didn't even ask for a DOD ID, anything, you know. They're like, we really need help. We are overworked. And I was surprised, because I was like, the only reason I haven't done this yet is because I thought that you guys are going to ask for credentials and, you know, but it turned out, of course, I didn't have access to anything, you know. But it turned out that they really just needed help, somebody to go and take people's vitals, you know.
Right.
They talked to my employer and they asked about, you know, who I am, what type of person I am, and, you know, and they're like, yeah, of course, you know, Blanca can do it. And I went there literally until 2 or 3 a.m., would go to work at 7 a.m., but I was at that hospital every single day. I couldn't stop. That's where I fell in love. That was where I fell in love with the Army, because I saw how much they were doing for a country, and I was like, so I would talk to soldiers. I would be like, why do you keep coming back? You know, it's like, you guys, because I would see a lot of people getting injured and a lot of loss in that hospital. It was crazy. The things that you see in a combat hospital is definitely different from any other hospital that you will ever experience, you know, especially if you're in Role 3 in Kandahar, you know, in Afghanistan. It was...
It's trauma care.
Yes, it's definitely difficult, but you get used to the site every day. Anyhow, I'd be like, well, you guys keep on coming back, you know, what is it? And he's like, I know we're making a change in those people's lives. I know that we're making a change for those people. And that's where I realized I want to do that, because that's what I've always wanted to do. I wanted to make a difference in a large scale in people's lives, you know. And yeah, that's where I fell in love with the Army and with the military.
So at this point, you're familiar with the military. You've seen it quite a bit. You still haven't been to the U.S. What brought you to the U.S.? Did you, at that point, was that when you decided, hey, I want to get on the ground in, the United States?
Yeah, so at that point, that was already toward the end of my contracting time. So yeah, actually your question whether I had been ever to the States, I was in the States. My first time ever coming to America was when KBR was doing in-processing, and I had to go to Houston, Texas to in-process with KBR. So that was my first time in the United States, and arriving, I'm sure you have quite a story on arriving to the United States. It was the greatest. I had never felt home anywhere in my entire life, and I had traveled all over the place, all over the world. I had never had that feeling of I am home now. This is it. But when I arrived in Houston and I see all these buildings, I see the airport, and of course I'm looking out the airplane and I see how amazing and how big America is, You have everything just so much bigger, Big trucks,
It's
big
Texas.
buildings,
I mean, it's Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, supposedly.
And Walmart, oh my gosh, the place where you can buy anything, It was just so, it was crazy, That's where I fell in love with actually knowing that I wanted, that this was going to be my home, that America was going to be it, and no other place was ever going to be able to replace it or to feel like it.
So then, at what point? So you said that, I don't remember what year, but you now have a familiarity with the U.S. You have a familiarity with the Army.
Mm-hmm.
What was the triggering mechanism for you to say, I want to join the Army?
So I come into the United States on a student visa, knowing that I was going to join the Army. Like, that wasn't even after World 3 and after Kandahar and after Afghanistan, that contracting life, I knew I was going to wear the uniform. How I was going to make it, there was no plan in place. Like, I was going to figure it out somehow, but I knew I was going to wear the uniform. For me, that was it. I came to the United States on a student visa. I studied Homeland Security at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach.
Okay.
I tried throughout the entire time as I was a student, I tried to join the military on a certain program called the MAVNI program. For years. I went to different states to recruiters. I would talk to numerous recruiters, and it didn't have to be the Army. For me, it was the military. I was going to wear that flag on my shoulder. It didn't matter which branch it was going to be, I tried the Air Force, I tried the Marines, I tried the Army, but nobody would take me. Even though I had a memorandum signed by the Department of Defense that this memorandum states that you can take people that were not green card holders and have that and that are fulfilling certain requirements,
right. Yeah, I remember the program.
Right. So if you fulfilled these requirements, you were eligible to join the Army without green card, without being naturalized. But they just didn't know about it,
right.
They weren't familiar with the program. And even if I showed them the memorandum, they'd be like, no, that's not. I remember a specific recruiter in South Carolina. She turned me down, but she was polite, but she turned me down so bad that I gave up for at least a year after that. I'm like, oh, maybe that's not it. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'm not supposed to join the Army or military. Maybe there is a different way, or maybe there is another way, or maybe I just shouldn't be in the military.
Right.
after that. And then after a while, I'm like, nothing's ever discouraged me this much before, you know? Why should I let somebody discourage me to make a decision that is going to impact my future so much, and maybe even other people's future, if I can make a difference, you know? So after, I think, 8 or 9 months, I tried again. I kept on going to recruiters and I kept on being told no. But talking about persistence and
Yeah, no,
perseverance.
so far, yeah, absolutely.
I went to the mall in Daytona Beach, and I just passed by a recruiting station. It wasn't my intention that day to go to the recruiter, but I passed by there and I'm like, why have I never come to this place? Like, because I live in Daytona, right? Why have I not been here yet? So I walk in and I spoke to Sergeant First Class Michael Cube. I will never forget him, because he was the one who changed my life forever. He knew what I was talking about. He looked at the memo, he's like, oh, I don't need this. I just got somebody signed up with the MAVNI program a couple months ago. I know the process. I know everything you need to know and you need to do. So he's like, let's start the process. And we sit down for a few hours, got everything done. It took me about 2 years to finally actually go to basic training, because I still had to finish college. But JT here, I wasn't allowed to go to OCS, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go in as an officer. Since I already had a degree, I was going to come in with a degree, but I wasn't naturalized and I wasn't, you know, so the immigration status at the point was the big factor as to why I enlisted as opposed to commissioning. And that's how my journey as a soldier began.
So you talked about how you got to the Army. You know, it's quite a long journey, so there's a lot of persistence, which is really admirable on your behalf, you know, to keep continuing to push to serve, you know, in the U.S. military. So how did you get to Psyop? What made you say that's the job that I really want to do?
Right. So remember when I said that I wanted to make a difference in a large scale? I wanted to help a lot of people. I knew that I wanted to help a lot of people. And when I initially joined, as I said, I wasn't able to go officer. I wasn't able to do what I really wanted to do, because I was so limited in choice in MOSs. One of the MOSs that was offered to me was becoming a 68 Whiskey, which is a healthcare specialist or a combat medic that we call it, right? And that was the most challenging to me. There were, of course, combat engineering, etc., but 11 Bravo, but that was not what I wanted. I wanted something challenging, because I had just finished college, and if I couldn't go OCS, then I at least was going to do something that was going to challenge me. And then remember my time at Role 3, that was also another reason why I chose becoming a medic, since I couldn't do what I really wanted to do, was coming into Intel. When I finished AIT, throughout AIT, people were telling me, why don't you go special operations? And I'm like, first of all, I finally made it here, and that was literally reaching for the stars. Like, I was reaching, and I made it because of my persistence. But me dreaming that far was already out of the question. Like, that was way too far. I'm wearing the uniform. That's all I wanted, right? People kept on telling me, why don't you go special operations, civil affairs, but I never had heard about psychological operations before. I got to Germany. I got stationed in Germany after my AIT as a medic, and
it's a little bit of irony there.
It is exactly. And so I begged them not to send me to Germany, because I wanted to stay in the States. I finally had made it. I became a naturalized citizen. It felt like I was being deported. You know, I'm going back to the country. You know, I'm like, I don't want to leave the United States. This is where I wanted to be. I didn't want to be in Europe. I wanted to be in this country. This is going to be my home. I felt like that was time wasted, because I was already 30 years old, and I had so much more to do career-wise that I wanted to achieve. I knew in Germany I wasn't going to achieve that. 30 days is what is in processing in Germany. That's what they give you, 30 days. And on day 29, the recruiters talk to us, special operations recruiters.
Okay.
You have a SF recruiter, you have a civil affairs recruiter, and a psychological operations recruiter. So the first to talk to us, and I'm like, yeah, civil affairs is awesome, man. I want to join it, you know. Then the psychological operations recruiter comes on stage and he starts talking. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this existed. This is it. This is what I want to do. He talks about influencing in a large scale. He talks about using was mentioned before, using pamphlets and media and different outlets to talk to a large scale, like a big group of people, you know, to be able to influence their minds, their thoughts. And for me, of course, I absolutely believe in the Western lifestyle, and I want to let people know that you can enjoy basic human rights, you know. You can enjoy, even in your own country, you can enjoy basic freedoms. You as a woman, especially women in different countries, like I said, I was in the Middle East for a long time. You as a woman, you have rights. You don't have to stay indoors. You don't have to listen to the men in the house. If you want to, you can fight it, you
Right.
know. For me, I'm a fighter, so that's just natural. And so I'm like, psychological operations is it. This is it for me. So I talked to the recruiter, and we sat down and filled out the paperwork, and I was in selection after a month. Therefore, I was a medic for 2 months, and then I went to selection, got selected, and
Now you're here.
now I'm here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's a really cool story. So I appreciate both of you sharing that. You know, both very unique backgrounds, very different tracks. You know, how you got here, why you got here, and I think you guys, you know, whether you realize it yet or now or maybe in the future, but you're going to bring a really good perspective to the mission sets that we send soldiers out to. So I kind of want to get into another topic. You talked about it a little bit earlier, having moved around a little bit, but for either of you, you had a little bit of familiarity with American culture, TV, media.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like coming actually into the American culture? You know, we talk about culture shock. A lot of times soldiers that have never been places, or even civilians, they go on a vacation, they don't understand things because it's different. Cultures are different. Did you have any experiences like that, and what was it like, both coming into American society, but also coming into the military? Because the military is a whole different culture as well.
Yes. One significantly different thing that can be characterized is the Korea Eastern side culture is more of collectivism.
Okay.
Meanwhile, on the other hand, U.S. or Western culture has individualism. So that affect the soldier, that affect the military organization too. So when I was in South Korea, we were for the group. I live for the army. I do for the army. So Korean army get the job done. However, there is no creativity. You just do it how you were be told. But when I came to U.S. Army, they are like cowboys. They have creativity, although they cannot be controlled easily individually, but they have great creativity when they conduct their mission or anything. So I think I love it. That's why I think U.S. Army is the best army around the world.
I agree. Absolutely agree. I will say the collective idea is still there because it takes the team to solve the problem.
Exactly.
But I will say that we give soldiers the ability to problem solve, especially here in special operations, and so giving them that ability to think a little bit outside the norm and not just all the time do what you're told, I think is where it allows us to have the flexibility to solve, those problem sets, collectively,
Yes.
but with different solutions.
That was the most hard part
Really?
as I becoming a soldier in United States. I can execute everything by the doctrine. Perfect. But when it comes to new scenario, I felt that I have lack of creativity, that I can solve my own way. But throughout the course and being in the unit, they taught me a lot of like you mentioned, how to think, not how to execute. So both things are important, but in the US, they encourage you, especially in psychological operation, special operation, they encourage you to think differently outside of box. So that's what I really love about the psychological operation.
Okay. And then how about you, Blanca? Any experiences with that culture shock?
Yes, many, but we won't have time to talk about all of them.
Just give us one good recent one, maybe with relation to either the Army or Psyop.
The Army in general was, of course, it was a culture shock for me. Just being, it's a different culture, right? Just being in the Army from a civilian world is a different culture. I had already had an experience in Afghanistan during the time I was contracting, working 12-hour days shift. So for me, where they'd be like, the Army owns you for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that wasn't a big deal for me because that's literally what we did over there. I can't even say being a female in a male-dominated area is a culture shock to me either, because that's what we were in Afghanistan as well. So we were minority gender everywhere we went. So it's easy for me to be in an environment where it's male dominated. And I never have had any problems with that. The field was probably a bigger culture shock when we would go to the field and we'd stay out in the dirt and see our school, of course, that's completely selection, those are definitely physical endurance that I had never been exposed to before. And I don't think that you can even say that I ever will be, especially when it comes to selection, just because that's where you realize how far your body can actually go. That's where because you have to be so persistent and resilient and dedicated toward, you have to literally be ready to crawl to the finish line in order to finish. Like, just knowing that you are, even if your physical strength lets you down, you have to mentally be strong enough to make it to the finish line, not just physically. That is definitely a big culture shock to me, where for me, staying in the field longer periods of time. Mentally, I had always had to be resilient, so that wasn't one of the questions where I was like, I don't know if I can make selection because I don't know if I'm going to be mentally capable of, being that resilient mentally. And I'm like, no, I know I can. Physically, I'm not quite sure if I can make it, but mentally, I know for a fact I can. So yeah, the physical portion was definitely a big culture shock for me, coming into the Army in general.
And then now it's another level for special operations.
Yes. So yeah, you have to be constant with your training, and you have to continuously train up for the next level, especially if you have big plans, for your future, not just wanting to stay in one place, because I'm never satisfied. I'm always wanting to go further, wanting to do better in my job, wanting to learn more, wanting to go to more schools. I've never, just stayed there and be like, oh, this is it for me. This is, I know there is more, especially if you're doing well. In psychological operations, what I have noticed is if you do well in your job, you get so many opportunities from within the regiment. They give you They give you schools, they give you opportunities that you would not get anywhere else but here. And that's why I'm the biggest fan of Psyop. I'm definitely, I love it. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And I think you touched on a good point. The resilience and just the desire to excel.
Mhm.
That's the majority of the people we have here. So if you're, the kind of individual that's just satisfied, as the Army says, meeting the standard, that's not the norm here. We expect people to do more and want to do more to achieve, that excellence. And so two different perspectives. So very much for you, the shock was the mental thinking capacity, and for you it was physical. And so it's, it's good to see, and even talking about the course, you talked about selection, you're tested both physically and mentally through the entire process. And so it's, for somebody who's interested, I've talked to, the recruiters, we've talked to other people that are kind of the overseers of all the course, and you hear from them, you want to be well-rounded. Well, now what I hear from you guys is you have to be well-rounded. So, you having the mental capacity, but feeling that you needed to work on the physical and the opposite for yourself. So that's, that's a testament to anybody that's looking for this as a career field. Hey, be well-rounded. Don't just focus in one area. So I'm curious, we talked about your backgrounds, from the Korean Peninsula, kind of, I'll say all around Europe, because you bounced around quite a bit, and then, even to the Middle East. Coming into the U.S. and coming into the military and PSYOP, do you all feel that being, an immigrant naturalized citizens with your previous backgrounds, has that brought any advantages to PSYOP or to the Army?
Absolutely.
What do you think?
As a Korea-born soldier, I think like them, I act like them, I speak like them. So without knowing culture 100%, how you are going to influence the people? For me, I understand the culture, either South and North Korean. So I think I can influence my target audience, which is North Korean, probably. So thinking back, I came here without not talking any American. I built my perception of the America through the media, listening hip-hop music, watching TV show, watching movies, and I fell in love with America without meeting a real actual American.
Okay.
So if we imply same thing to the, say, North Korea, if we can penetrate information over there, they will change. So here's my question. Do you know how many people defected from North Korea last year? Yes. 500. Officially 500, but probably more than that. Then second question. Do you know how many North Korean soldiers or North Korean people got killed by South Korean army or allied force last year?
No.
0. So if I can utilize psychological operation,
Right.
I can save their life without pointing a gun point at them.
Yep.
So that's what attracted me and fascinated me all the time.
No, that's
So I believe I brought this strength to the regiment, and I love to utilize my strength and experience.
no, it's good. For me, you all are a few of the people that I've met myself. I had an NCIC a few years back that was from Panama. So he was born and raised, immigrated to the U.S. It's very similar stories, refugee status. He was the era, the late 90s. The U.S. invaded Panama. That whole story. He was his story sounded very much like yours as a refugee, and so came in. Finally, he ended up in PSYOP. And the first time he went back, was with me on his team, and so it was very interesting to see his point of view and perspective, having lived there for 18 years. You know, born, raised, speaks the language, and then, you know, here we are back, you know, together, and he's showing me places where he grew up and how to talk to certain people, and because the culture, like you mentioned, having been there and understanding it and knowing it, you know, I didn't know. I mean, I had a general familiarity because we do studies. We're very academic in this career field, but the things that he knew, I could never know, just because he lived it for so many years. So you guys bring that interesting perspective. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I was interviewed by a soft contractor who was working on a program for soft. They asked me if culture can be learned, and because apparently it's a controversial subject.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yes, of course culture
Absolutely.
can be learned.
Yeah.
Because apparently there was opinions, and it was subjective, and they were saying, some were saying that it couldn't be learned. And I said, yes, you can learn it. You can learn how the natives act, how the natives speak, only if you go to the country, only if you are exposed long enough. You cannot learn it from books. You cannot learn it just by being here in country, speaking to me in that language, and hoping that at some point it's going to click. You know, it's just not, it's not going to happen. You won't come across like the natives. You will not understand their way of thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I come from a very diverse background, right? So I said earlier that I grew up in a Muslim household, therefore I understand the Muslim culture. However, because I grew up around the German culture and I went to a German school and all my friends were German, early on I realized that the Muslim culture is not, the Muslim religion is not exactly what I wanted in my life. Therefore, I changed religions together with my siblings. But we still, of course, were surrounded by the Muslim culture and the religion itself. When you have somebody like me or like YJ, you will realize that you have something extraordinary when it comes to us and recruiting. We in psychological operations should always try and find the individuals where we are individuals here in the United States who are native born to that country. However, they came into the United States legally the way we did it, right? We joined the military, even coming straight into psychological operations, even if we didn't enlist prior to and had rigorous background checks, because we did. If you have people like that coming into psychological operations, they're valuable. It's pertinent for us to understand that a diverse culture in psychological operations is important for us to be able to move forward, especially in the host nation, you know?
No, absolutely.
And then for us to be able to teach other people in psychological operations.
No, it's for me, it's been a great experience, working with, naturalized citizens that have come over to Psyop, come over to the military. Like, it's a testament to what you guys do. I always, growing up, this is home for me. I've loved being in the country, but to see you guys come in and appreciate it just as much, if not more, like that, it gives me a sense of pride because you're serving next to me and you're bringing something, an added benefit to it. So I really think, it's a testament to your character, and I thank you guys for doing what you do, what you do and what you've done to get here, because, I don't know if I was in your shoes, if I would have followed the same path, because it's definitely an arduous path. It has not been without, any kind of roadblocks or stumbles, along the way. So, like I said, I appreciate it, and I thank you guys for what you've done to get here.
Thank you.
I'm gonna kind of, because we're short on time, I want to kind of sum up things here. So if you guys have any last minute tips, advice for anybody that's thinking about the military, thinking about Psyop, maybe somebody that's sitting where you guys were sitting, a few years ago. Do you guys have anything?
I have something to say to fellow Korea-born soldiers. So, although I'm U.S. citizen right now, I still love the country where I was born, and I still care about them. And I'm sure other fellow Korean-born soldiers will think the same. So, if you guys want to take a part to change the environment over there, please join us and let's make a change. That's what I want to say.
Okay, thank you. Anything?
For me, I would like to tell people that are thinking about joining special operations and psychological operations in specific, not to get discouraged or to allow other people to discourage you. Before I joined, after I was called to come to selection, I was told that I was never going to be able to make it. Mentally and physically, it was going to be too tough for me. They didn't know my past, therefore they made that statement. I was a little skeptical about my physical ability, that's for sure. Therefore, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to go follow through with it after after that individual who was high in the ranks told me that. However, I decided not to listen, and I still went, and I persevered, and I made it through. And so will everybody who is actually wanting to make a difference. Therefore, don't allow others to discourage you. Take it as a sign. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you have to prepare yourself. But don't stress too much. Go to selection. Give it a try. It's not going to hurt you. It's only going to make you stronger.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree. The one thing I tell a lot of people is don't self-select. Don't believe the naysayers. Push yourself, to achieve your goals.
Yeah.
Even with the roadblocks that may be put in front of you. So you guys are definitely a testament to getting over that and making your way to our regiment. So again, I applaud you both, and I appreciate you guys being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. I really enjoyed your stories, and hopefully there's somebody out there that relates to what what you talked about today, and they make the decision to come over to the regiment. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this week. As always, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.